Okay, welcome. So happy that you're here. And today is our move into stillness meeting, and we're going to we're going to explore a logically, at least to me, what is the next step in or the next this next step in our sequence or progression that we've been exploring over the last I don't know, weeks now. So just to recap what we've been exploring, we've been um, noticing the breath. We've been allowing for the breath to become calmer, which allows for less depletion of carbon dioxide, which helps to support greater, well, on one hand, for one thing, relaxation of the musculature, because you're not going to be experiencing so much tetany from the depletion of CO2. Also helps to shift the nervous system to a less stressed state. So it should help you to perceive or feel calmer within your entire self, physically and non-physically. So then what we've explored is, I believe we explored noticing that they are inviting for the possibility of the natural pause at the end of the exhalation, so that transition between exhalation and inhalation is perhaps somewhat extended beyond what would be otherwise mechanically the habit. So we have a mechanical habit of everything, including breathing. And so when you start to pay attention, you'll notice that actually you're breathing mechanically sometimes more often than is needed. So we breathe maybe more volume per breath, which is called tidal volume, and also more frequently than is really necessary. And it's just a habit. And that habit carries with it not only the physical ramifications, but also emotional and mental. So by allowing for the breathing to become truly natural, spontaneous, and harmonious, then it makes sense that everything is going to be better. So that should be hopefully what you're experiencing. Now you might also be experiencing some other things that go along with that, because it's a learning process. And so that it can happen that there can be some experience of strain at times, or frustration, or discouragement, or a sense of I don't know, can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but there can be many different types of experiences that could be provoked in that exploration. So yes, you might experience those as well, but you want to be noticing when those things happen, and then start to observe to see how can you allow for those unnecessary difficulties to be released, so that you can again find that flow of ease and relaxation, naturalness, because that should be the guide. That's really what we're aiming for. So that's where you're going to get the most benefit. Then we started to explore introducing some movement in coordination. Well, not necessarily in coordination, maybe in coordination. Could be in coordination, it could not be coordinated with the breath, but together with breath. So some movement together with breath. In particular, with the if possible, noticing that breath hold. I'm going to just call it a breath hold, or we'll call it a pause, because it's mm, we could use, well, I'll use the word pause for now. So if you're noticing that pause, then you're wanting to start to see in particular that you can move what the experience of conscious movement during that pause is. Because in that pause, when you really start to find the deep rest within it, even if it's only for a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, you'll start to find that there's something quite remarkable about that experience, because you can relax more deeply. There's less noise in the nervous system because you're able in that moment to relax much more deeply. So even the diaphragm can be relaxed, even everything can be relaxed except for whatever is just required for that movement that you're doing. So it really helps your nervous system to get clearer on how to optimize the movement so that you can release what Feldenkrais would call the parasitic elements of the movement. So, to bring it back to an earlier point from maybe months ago, or one that I haven't probably brought up in months, but it's an important point, is that we can understand that given the circumstances and the intention, there's one and only one optimal way to perform the action that will result in that in the result that's wanted in the desired outcome, in the optimal way. So there are many variations that are less efficient and to varying degrees of inefficiency, some of which could be so inefficient they could be very harmful, that are patterns that we can find ourselves in the habit of. And we're largely unconscious of those. We have whole narratives that justify them, that keep us locked into those habits, because we say things to ourselves such as, well, I'm too old to make any change, or that's just the way my body is, or that's just the limit of what's possible. Everybody knows that this kind of suffering is just part of the human condition. Or you tell yourself stories about, well, if I had more time, if I only had more of whatever, fill in the blank, if I had more money, more youth, more energy, more enthusiasm, more whatever, any, more support, only I lived in a different place at a different time with different people, and on. We make all of these excuses. And that becomes our perception of ourselves. That's our perceived reality. Meanwhile, we're overlooking that what's actually going on is that we are holding ourselves in a way that is producing this state, producing this experience. And that is that ignorance is a very core ignorance, because when we can finally see that that's not true, then a great amount of freedom opens up for us. And you'll see then that the things that the previous limitations that you assumed were real, they disappear, because not that others might not appear, because that sometimes happens, but because we're going to encounter all of those false beliefs along the way. But those same old ones that you felt so stuck with for such a long time, those can be done. Those don't need to be obstacles any longer. So that's the aim, is that we want to, in the exploration, we want to have that level of gentleness, so that, and that level of relaxation, that kind of depth of relaxation that allows us to become very, very conscious of precisely where those parasitic elements are so that we can release them, dissolve them, and regain the conscious control or regain conscious sensory motor awareness. So today we're going to take, as I say, the next step in that, which is um, I'm going to preface this with some little bit of caution, which is I'm going to share with you a technique. It's a classic yogic technique that is not a secret. It's you can find it in you can find it all over YouTube. You can find it. It's described in this book, Light on Pranayama by Iyengar. You find it in any pranayama book. You find it in a lot of hatha yoga books. I'm you find it in a lot of places. So it's not like a big secret, but I want to provide a little bit of it is a fairly powerful technique, and so even though it's public knowledge, I want you to be respectful of it, because I don't think you're likely to hurt yourself as long as you follow the instructions. But if you really follow the instructions, you definitely will not hurt yourself, and you'll only receive benefits. So just let that encourage you to actually follow the instructions, and don't fall prey to old habits of being, thinking that you have to do more, or ignoring your experience, ignoring the sensations, ignoring the signals from the body, and trying to override that because you have some idea of what you think you should be doing. Okay. So in other words, I'm going to give the instructions, and you are not required to actually do the actions. The only requirement is that you hear the instructions and you take them to heart, but you don't need to do the action unless you are certain, or you're clear that it would be okay for you. So this is what's called Udiana Kriya. So Udiana, I think, means upward flying, and I think it's so named because and Kriya just means action. So the result of this is also, I found out there's something, the same basic action is called, in a modern restorative context, primarily used for pelvic floor dysfunction. There's a system that's developed, which is inspired by Uddiyana Kriya. They call it hypopressive. So you maybe have heard that word used. And interestingly, I just learned about this recently, but they use the Kriya in a similar way that I have independently found to be very useful. So I think that's independent corroboration of its efficacy. So the first thing is, if you've eaten recently and you have a full stomach, then you may consider waiting until later in order to actually do the Kriya. It's up to you. I think I think probably Iyengar would caution that you should wait he'd probably say wait 4 hours. I have to tell you, I've never really, I've never personally followed that instruction. So you can be your own judge as to what to do there. But if you feel uncomfortable, then obviously you wouldn't want to do it if you're experiencing discomfort. If you happen to be pregnant, I don't think anybody here is pregnant, but if you happen to be pregnant, then You would probably not want to do this unless you'd had some kind of clearance from somebody who you know and trust in that regard. And if you have other conditions that you have concern that may make it inadvisable, then use your best judgment there. So and obviously, well, it's obvious, it's not obvious to you yet, but it will be obvious in a moment. If you feel unable to hold your breath at the end of the exhalation for even a second, you're probably going to not do this because it will require that you're able to hold your breath for a few seconds. So the way that I will instruct you through this, I would suggest for now that you practice it when you're sitting. Eventually, you'll do it lying down if you wish, or from any position. But to begin with, I'd say do it sitting upright. And so you're just going to breathe through your nose as you would normally. And just let the breath become relaxed, gentle. So we're not trying to do the world's biggest breaths. We're not trying to strain to reduce the breath. We're just relaxing the breath, letting it normalize so that it's not excessive. It becomes more spontaneous and natural. And if you notice that, for example, your hands feel warmer, maybe your whole body feels warmer, you feel more relaxed, then that's a really good indication that you're doing it well. So now you're noticing there's inhalation, and then there's the exhalation, and that repeats over and over and over. And between those, you notice that there's a transition between inhalation and exhalation and inhalation. And what I'd like you to do is start to particularly notice on that transition between the exhalation and inhalation that you can just allow for that to be extended, perhaps. Now, in order for that to occur, you need to not be straining. So what can happen is that at the bottom of the exhalation, what we think of as the bottom of the exhalation, where we've sort of arbitrarily placed that, is not necessarily physiologically the bottom of the exhalation. So we may be holding some tension somewhere that we're not fully letting go of, or maybe we're squeezing out the exhalation, and that's not useful or necessary. And so that creates this strain. And so that can make it difficult to allow for that pause to extend. So you really want to start to notice at the bottom of the exhalation, allowing that to be completely relaxed. And so don't try to hold the breath out. Don't try to force the breath out. Instead, you want to find where the breath is naturally out without any strain. So you're just breathing in this way, observing. And at a certain point, you'll notice that you're kind of comfortable a little bit with that. And maybe you notice that you feel that you could begin to take the next step in the sequence. So only if and when you perceive that that's the case, then should you follow the next steps, which are that at the end of an exhalation, you're going to close the glottis, which means closing the throat from within, inwardly, so that no air passes through, even if you were to try and inhale, no air would pass through the throat. And you want to, then you're going to, as if you're inhaling, but the air can't come in because you've closed the glottis, and you're going to allow for the abdomen to be sucked in and up, and the rib cage will expand up and out to the sides, which is why it's called upward fly, ujjayi, I believe, Udiana, rather, I believe. So I'll just demonstrate how this looks so you can see. So breathing, and then I'll do a few breaths, and then I'll show you the Kriya. So then it's important that you do not release the glottis until you've reversed that Kriya, because otherwise what will happen is it will be stressful because a whole bunch of air will get sucked in, and the abdomen will drop. And so you want to it should be controlled, so that you perhaps noticed, if you were able to see on the screen, that I lifted up the bottom of my shirt so you could see that the abdomen gets sucked in and up, and the rib cage flares. And I can even, maybe I can even find, just because it might be useful to you, I can see, I'll show find the picture in here so I can show you what it looks like when Iyengar does it. So he shows, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but he shows it standing, and you can see, and he classically, in this image, you can see he's kind of bent over, and then this one, he stands up, and you can see how the abdomen is sucked in and the ribs flare. So that's, but then you need to reverse that while the glottis is still closed, so that you're not inhaling until you've lowered the abdomen. Okay. And then you should be able to resume breathing normally through the nose. So if it's too long or it becomes a strain, then when you resume breathing, it will be erratic and big. So just the same as we've done in previous iterations of our exploration of normalized breath, so too here, you don't want to have an overly exaggerated inhalation or exhalation following that breath. So it should be a non-strenuous. So you don't have to. Now, another thing about this is that you don't have to try to get the maximum movement. You don't have to try to suck your abdomen up into your chest. You want to you want to feel that movement happening, but it can be, it could be on a spectrum, anywhere from very subtle to very dynamic. So after you do that, assuming you do, and if you don't, then you don't. So remember that. You should breathe through the nose normally, a few breaths, and then if you want to do it again, you may repeat it again. And when you do it, each time that you do it from now on, what I want you to notice as you're doing it is how you can then relax even more deeply, particularly in the torso, particularly in the abdomen. So notice when you do it, is there any strain? And if there's strain, you want to relax that, because what's actually happening here is that uh, you should be able to relax the abdomen much more deeply. So if you find that there's some tension in the abdomen, then it's revealing to you some sensory motor amnesia. So we're wanting to notice that and then consciously making the connection and sending the instruction inwardly to release and soften that area. Ideally, while you're still holding that Kriya, and then throughout continuously as you release the Kriya. So it should all be smooth, slow, continuous, controlled. Ideally, it should be pleasurable. So if it's not those things, then do less. Don't strive so much that you're moving beyond what you're presently capable of. You want to always be on the edge of that so that you're moving through those limitations, but not so far out into the unknown that you're afraid or fearful, fearful or I think fearful is the main thing. You kind of see that that's at the root of all of it. So we want to be right at that edge where we can be adequately present, aware, calm, and relaxed to be able to release the unnecessary tension, because that's what feeds back into the nervous system that allows your nervous system to be updated and to know, oh, this is how to be in the body in a good way. This is how to move in a good way. This is how to feel in a good way. So if you're practicing something that results in stress and strain, then what you're doing is practicing stress and strain. And that's not what you want. So it's really important that you're always practicing in a way that as much as possible results in feeling good, because then you're practicing feeling good, which is what you want. Which I'm going to say again, because it's a really important point and one that's so foreign to most of us. So that is that you are what you in action, in material reality, in embodiment, you are what you do. And so if you're doing strain and stress or frustration or anger or any of these victimization or whatever, then that's your experience. And we usually will beat our heads against the wall, metaphorically, thinking that somehow practicing frustration or anger or whatever these sorts of things is somehow going to help us to overcome them. It won't, except in as much as it eventually is so profoundly painful that we hit rock bottom, so to speak, and then we realize, oh, I've been practicing the wrong thing. But you can spare yourself all of that by being wise now and realizing the same thing that you would realize at some point in the future. You could realize that now, which is, I don't want to continue practicing that which I don't want. Instead, I will practice what I do want. So you have to do everything that you do to the best of your ability with that in mind, with that intention, because then you will feel better. Then you will enjoy your experience. Maybe not like that with the snap of a finger, but it sets in motion the virtuous cycle of what you want. So I've repeated that, and then I'm just going to tie it in with what we've just done, just as a reminder that if you are feeling overwhelmed, or you don't know how to do this without strain, then do less. It's not a thing in which you must be able to do this thing perfectly in order to be okay in life. This is just something that is a tool, or a tool or a skill or some a technique that can be valuable when used in the right way. But it's not, there are plenty of people who don't use this technique and will never use the technique and are going to be fine without it. So it's not like you must, but it can be useful, which is why I'm sharing it with you. So be gentle and light with it. If you take it too seriously, if it becomes a heavy, burdensome thing, then that's counter to what you want. And don't hurt yourself. Okay. So now I'm just going to, before you get super carried away and you do like 100 of them, I'm going to give you a little bit of information around that. So Iyengar cautions, without giving reason, he cautions, only practice this one time per day. Well, one set per day, one set of Uddiyana Kriya per day. And he says, limit the set to no more than 8 repetitions of the Kriya. So he does not give reasons why. He doesn't caution what might happen if it's overdone. And I have not seen that same caution given elsewhere. So, and I will add that I personally have not ever in many years, which I guess could be a cautionary tale in and of itself, but I have never restricted my practice of Uddiyana Kriya to 8 times a day. So I don't have any personal insight into why that caution is given. If you wish to follow that, then you certainly may. You have that information, and it certainly would be a cautious approach. So that is something that you could consider. I will say that I'm just giving you some information. My understanding of the people, the system of instruction for pelvic floor restoration that I mentioned, which they call this hypopressive, I've not heard any such cautions about limiting it to 8 per day, but I have, but they do say do it every other day. Why? I don't know. I also have never followed that, so I can't tell you from my own experience why that caution might be there. So I'm not going to give you a limit to it, but you have that information. And I would say what I have noticed is that it can be very fatiguing in a somewhat surprising way. And so I would recommend that you don't overdo it right away. I guess I'll put it that way. So why don't you start with no more than 8 per day? And then as you feel comfortable, if you wish to increase it, that would be your choice. But do so, I would say, to maximize your experience, to optimize your experience. You would want to increase it probably by a few a day, not doubling it each day. Okay, so I'm going to give you some other suggestions for how you can explore using all of this, putting it all together, because there's a lot here that can be, as I've suggested, it can be very helpful. But it's nuanced, so it takes some experience. So you need to practice a fair amount to really start to understand it. But so there are 2 things that you can do. You have 2 options. One is that you're practicing breath normalization, not to an extreme, but just gentle awareness, breathing through the nose, not breathing mechanically, breathing naturally and spontaneously in a relaxed way, and allowing every breath to help you to inwardly relax more and more, so you can start to become more aware of the habitual holding patterns, and you can start to voluntarily release them. So that's one option. Another option is that you can intermittently at the transition between exhalation and inhalation, you can practice the Udiana Kriya. And when you do so, you are to focus on noticing the residual unnecessary tension, particularly in the abdomen, that you notice, and consciously beginning to release that. Now, here are a couple other variations or things that you can do that will amplify the results that you get. So one thing is hand placement. So this is something I've shared many times, but not in combination with these other things that I've shared with you now. So I want to explore how you can bring it all together, and you can use hand placement with the breath awareness, and possibly also with the Uddiyana Kriya. So you, when you place your hands somewhere, your hands have, if you ever were interested in doing so, if you haven't ever done so, you could look online and look up sensory homunculus, I think, is what you'd want to look for. And there is actually a region of the brain that's called the sensory motor homunculus, and homunculus means little man. So I don't think there's actually a little man in there, maybe, but I don't think so. But but it's represented sometimes visually, because it's an interesting thing, as what it would look like if it was a man, in terms of the representation of that on that sensory motor homunculus, as it corresponds to the parts of the physical body, and it shows the proportions of them and how they're disproportionate relative to the actual physical body. Hands have enormous representation, which shouldn't be that surprising, because we all have that experience, that our fingers are very sensitive versus, for example, our backs. So they say, most people if with eyes closed, could be able to differentiate between 2 points, 2 pins at an eighth of an inch apart. But, and I'm sorry, I don't know what that would be in metric, but on the other hand, a lot of people can't tell the difference between 2 points 2 inches apart on their back. So the sensitivity is very different between these. And so we all have that experience. Well, what that means is when you use your hands and you place your hands on your own body, particularly in areas of your body where you don't have that level of awareness, you are helping yourself. It's like you're bringing more information into your brain about that area, which helps you then to sense internally and be able to develop that inner sense of that region, so that eventually you're not dependent on your hands in order to get that kind of information, because you have cultivated that inner awareness. But it's a teaching aid. It's like training wheels. So you can find, as you're breathing and relaxing and intending deeper relaxation, you can find, where do you notice that there seems to be some kind of discomfort or strain or tension, but you can't seem to quite let it go, just doing what you're doing. See if you can place your hand or hands there. If it happens to be that, here's another trick, is if it happens to that you find an area that is on one side, let's say the right side, that seems tense and you don't know how to let it go, place one hand there and then find the mirror image version of the same on the other side and place the other hand there. Because this, I find, is very helpful, because we are largely symmetrical, right to left. And so when I place my hands somewhere on the body that's on one side, and then I place the other hand on the other side, and the mirror of that same point, then what I find is that my brain is able to balance the two, because it has a reference point to kind of know what's possible here, what's right here, what's wrong here, what's what. So that can be very helpful. So now what you're doing is you're breathing in this really deeply relaxed way, and you're intending to allow for that even deeper relaxation as you notice where the unnecessary effort is, and you consciously are letting that go. And you're using your hands maybe in order to provide more feedback, so that you can more easily, more quickly, and more definitively let go of that unnecessary tension. Okay, so now, and obviously if you were to combine this with the Udiana Kriya, then what you would find, particularly in the abdomen, I mean, I would recommend at first really focusing on the abdomen when you're doing the Uddiyana Kriya. And if you place your hands there during the Kriya, you should find that everything in the abdomen should be relaxed. If it's not, then that's instantly gives you information, valuable information, that that's sensory motor amnesia. You've just found it. And that can help you then to begin to release that more deeply. So there are a lot of deep abdominal muscles and tissue. And we've talked about this before. There's a there are on the abdomen, on the front, you have and in the middle there, what's usually referred to as the six pack is the rectus abdominis, this long muscle that runs from the chest to the pubic bone. And then on the sides, you have three layers of muscles. You have the external obliques, the internal obliques, and the transverse abdominis. On the back side, you have some muscles there. I'm trying to think of, you've got the what is the can't think of what it's called, but there are muscles that run somewhat vertically from the back of from the sacrum to the lower ribs on the back, quadratus lumborum. And then you've got a bunch of muscles in the pelvis, small muscles mostly. And when you do the Udiana Kriya and you hollow out that area and you let it all be very soft, because you don't need to be holding any tension in there at all. And then you put your fingers gently pressing in, you'll find there are these areas of tension. There'll be, sometimes it will feel like a band. Sometimes it will feel like a rope. Sometimes it will feel like just a lump. Sometimes it will feel like it's been like the head of a drum that's been stretched really tight. And all of these are those kinds of sensations that you can encounter with your hands will let you know that you've just found some sensory motor amnesia, and this is good news. So then you can direct your attention and intention to release that. Okay, so as if that wasn't enough, we've got more. It's like a infomercial. And if you stay to the end, oh, I got a special gift for you now. So one last piece to this that I want to share with you that can then take this even to the next level, because obviously we've explored a very small amount, but how to begin to incorporate movement. But when you're able to do the Uddiyana Kriya, and in fact, even if you don't do the full Kriya, but if you hold the breath out by closing the glottis, even that will provide a similar, if not the same, benefit in this regard. You will find that particularly if you do the movement on the breath hold, it's very helpful because you're reducing the amount of information that your nervous system has to process. I'm not going to try to quantify it, but I will say personally, I find it's a very significant improvement in terms of the kinds of outcomes that I expect when I'm doing a movement on the breath hold at the end of the exhalation versus any other time. So what you can do is if you're able to do the breath hold, if you're not able to do the breath hold, then please remember you don't, because you'll get there if you need to eventually, but the best way is always to be where you are and working from where you are, observing yourself from where you are. That's always what's going to give you the best results. If you try to be somewhere else, you're just hindering your own progress, because you're always going to have to start where you are. So admitting where you are from the beginning will be the very fastest thing. But if you're able to do a breath hold, whether that's with the Kriya or not, then you can experiment with doing a small, slow, controlled movement during that breath hold. So, for example, if you're sitting upright, then what you could do is um, you could uh, on the exhalation, you could place your hands, for example, on just on the hips, on the iliac crests, and then while holding the breath, you could just gently uh, roll the pelvis forward, and then gently bring the pelvis to neutral, upright. And if you're still able to hold the breath, you could do that another time. If not, then you just breathe again and see how that is, because I find that it's very, very effective in terms of clarifying things, stuff that could otherwise take years. And this is in my experience, this is no exaggeration. This is the truth of my experience, is that things that could otherwise take years can be cleared up in literally in minutes. Um, and when I say that could take, I mean the things that would take years trying to deal with it in any other way that I'm aware of, and I'm aware of quite a few things. This is not to say, maybe I'm sure there's something somewhere that could be even faster, but this is really quite effective. And it's totally do it yourself. You don't have to go to somebody to do something for you or to you. So it's in my in from my view, it's the best thing that I'm aware of, which is why I'm sharing it with you. So um, I giving you a lot of information. It's somewhat subtle, but I don't want to overload you because that's already quite a lot. So we'll wrap it up there. So to conclude, and to suggest to you how you might make use of this, I recommend that you experiment gently but consistently with these ideas and practices that we've explored today, um, at least once a day. And if you're going to do the Udiana Kriya, then I think it's sensible start with limiting it to 8 per day. And then after a week, if you feel like you must increase it, then do so slowly, but knowing that Iyengar would not approve. And if you're not doing the Kriya, then you can still do the breath holds, where you're at the end of the exhalation, which should be relaxed, so you're not squeezing the air out. That is a way that the Uddiyana Kriya is often done, but that's not what I'm suggesting. So just when the exhalation is naturally at its end, then you can still close the glottis and do the movement that you're going to do during that breath hold. But it should never be stressful. So you need to be sure that you release the breath hold as soon as you need to inhale, so that it doesn't become stressful for you, because the inhalation that follows should be a normal, relaxed inhalation, not an exaggerated one, and it should be through the nose. But you can do those breath holds much more often if you would like to, much more often than 8 per day. You're not limited in that, as long as it's comfortable for you. It should never be uncomfortable. I mean, every once in a while, you're going to overshoot and you'll get into the range of mild discomfort, but it should never be. It should not be regularly uncomfortable. That should not be the experience. So then when you're doing that, you're wanting to explore these movements. I just suggested one to you today, which is I suggested you place the hands on the iliac crests if you're sitting upright, and during that breath hold, you can slowly rock the pelvis forward and backward. And of course, as you're doing that, you're aware of where there's unnecessary tension or strain. You'll feel it under your fingers, so that gives you feedback. And then inwardly, you can sense it. So you notice, oh yeah, there's that gripping there in the abdomen. There's that gripping there in the pelvic floor. I don't need to do that. So you slowly learn to release it. But you're not limited to exploring only in the seated posture. So you can also, if you're wanting to, you can do it from other positions. I would recommend for now that you limit it to either sitting or lying down, because it's probably all fairly new to you. So better to be in one of those positions rather than standing at this point. Not that you couldn't do it standing at some point, but for our purposes now, just to, unless I've instructed you otherwise or given you other options personally, just do it sitting or lying down. But notice then that you have other variations of movements that you can explore. For example, if you're lying down on your back with knees bent, here's a nice one that I really find quite helpful, is during the breath hold to put a hand on the knee and to sort of stabilize the knee, and then lift that foot up off the floor and move the leg, the thigh, around in a circle, so that the connection of the thigh to the pelvis becomes clearer. So because it's really that, it's like that ball of the thigh bone is moving in the hip socket. So it clarifies in the nervous system what the shape and position and relationship of the leg, the thigh, and the pelvis is. So that can really help to release stuff throughout the groin, in the pelvic floor, and in the lower abdomen, and in the waist, and in the buttocks. It's really, really, really nice. You might find, though, if you do that, you could get a very significant release all through that region. So then you want to follow through on that by getting up from that position with awareness, because what can happen is you can take 10 minutes to do this work and get a huge release and freedom in that whole region. And then if you just leap up and start doing things habitually, you don't integrate it. So you want to be sure that you get up consciously, maintaining awareness of that area, maintaining awareness of your breath, so that you're not straining with the breath, and see how it doesn't matter if it takes a long time. You can transition very slowly if necessary, but make the transition so that it's done with awareness, so that you don't lose all that you've just gained through doing that exploration. Now, it's almost invariable that you're going to lose some, because you will fall back into some patterns sooner or later. But then you can repeat the exploration. And each time you do, day by day, you should find that you're freer in your experience, freer in your body. So I'll just conclude it by saying that that should be your expectation, and that should be your experience. So when you're practicing, as I've been suggesting, then your expectation and your experience should be that day after day you discover greater freedom and ease. If you're not having that experience, then you owe it to yourself to get clearer on how to ensure that that is the case, because you have everything that you need in order to be able to have that experience. So the only reason that you wouldn't be having that experience is because you're being blocked by your own beliefs, and which then produce some action on your part that's incongruent with what you want. For example, if you have a belief that every day is the same, I never get better, every day is hard, life will always be hard, I don't even know what it would be like to be free or be happy, and so it's an impossibility, which most of us have those kinds of beliefs. So if you have those kinds of beliefs, then you'll see that what will happen is you'll say, oh, I'm going to do the exercise, but you'll go unconscious, and you allocate 10 minutes to the activity, but 10 minutes are, you're conscious for 10 seconds, and then the rest of it you've zoned out, and then you fling yourself up and you go into your thing and you say, yeah, see, it didn't work. But it's up to you, because it's your life and your intention, what you want, your desire. So you owe it to yourself to have a positive, powerful, healing experience whenever you want, because that's what this is. It's like, here's the technique. It works. You just have to work it. And when you gain skill at it, then you have the outcome. If you don't have the outcome, it's because you're not gaining skill. And if you're not gaining skill, it's because you're still allowing yourself to be hypnotized by old beliefs. So you owe it to yourself to challenge those beliefs. You have to look and see, what am I believing that's contrary to what I want? I want to feel better. I want freedom. I want ease. I want peace. I want confidence. So then it's up to you to practice that. And you can practice that. You have everything you need. You can find, you could lie down on the floor. You could lie down in bed. And then you just become present to the breath. So here you are, you're completely supported. You can relax, you can release, you can surrender, so that you're unburdening yourself of all of that unnecessary strain which you were unconsciously carrying. There, you're practicing peace, you're practicing competence, you're practicing confidence, you're practicing clarity. So you have to do that with the intention and follow through. And then anything else that you add on to that needs to be done with all that in mind, so that you don't, again, fall into the trap of thinking, well, Joey's taught this Udiana Kriya, and that seems really important in advance, so I've got to do that. And if I don't do that, then I'm never going to succeed. So I'm going to do that even though I don't know what I'm doing and I feel overwhelmed, then I feel uncomfortable. Well, then there you go. What's being exposed is that you've got some really unhelpful beliefs, and you want to examine those and deconstruct them, so that you can have the success that is what this is about. That I'm sharing this with you, because I know that it works and you can have success. But it is up to you. It's the thing about it is, I can't do it for you. Nobody can do it for you. You have to actually hear what it is that's being communicated in a sincere way, take it to heart, put it into practice, and then you get then you have the experience, and then it's confirmed, because you'll see, oh yes, this is the experience that Joey talked about. I know that I'm having that experience, so I'm succeeding. That should happen. So just finally, just to make sure it's really clear, that means every day you have the ability to gift yourself with this important thing, which is that you can choose, even if only for a minute, ideally longer than a minute, but even if only for 1 minute, to choose peace and to experience peace, to choose freedom and experience freedom. That is possible. That should be the outcome. And you have everything that you need in order to achieve that. So I hope that's clear. If it's not, you can always ask me questions, send me messages, and I will do my best to respond. And I did see there was a thing in the chat, so I'll respond to that after I end the recording. So thank you, everybody. Blessings to you. I hope that you're gentle with yourselves. I hope that you experience daily healing, because I know that's possible. So please take care. Blessings to you all. Bye for now.